Thursday night family group. It is, I never know the date. What's the date? September 15th. That's right. And we got a birthday in 2 days. So happy birthday, engineer guy. I won't embarrass you. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about resistance, resistance to change. Let me read this first, though. I can't read without my flashlight. Oh yeah. This is about honesty. Living in denial is living dishonestly. How many times have we lied to ourselves and others saying, I can stop at any time I want to, or I have the right to choose how I live my own life, or, my favorite, my behavior doesn't affect anybody but me. Ironically, as we asserted our freedom to live as we choose, we soon lost the freedom to choose anything other than our dependency. We became enslaved to it. Jesus said to some people who believed in him, "You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave of sin. A slave is not a permanent member of the family, but a son is part of the family forever. So if the Son sets you free, you are truly free. Why can't you understand what I'm saying? It's because you can't even hear me. For you are the children of your father, the devil. He was a murderer from the beginning. He has always hated the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, it is consistent with his character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. The spiritual forces that sway our life have roots in either truth or deceit. Truth leads to freedom, deceit leads to bondage and death. Denial is a lie that keeps us in slavery. When we are a slave to our addiction, we lose the right to choose any other way of life. It is only when we break the cycle of denial, when we become brutally honest about our bondage, that there is any chance for real freedom. I didn't realize it was going to get so rough there. I was like, okay, maybe I need to read them all and not just the first sentence. Okay, so resistance to change. Think about, we were kind of talking about this a couple days ago, it takes effort to resist something, right? Resistance isn't just simply ignoring or trying to disregard. You have to work at it, and that's actually part of the definition. So we're going to get into that. It's like let me share this. It kind of reminds me, when I was a kid, and you're supposed to do something, and you spend all this time and effort and energy to avoid doing it, and then your parent says you could have already finished it. You'd already be over at Timmy's house if you'd have just done it an hour ago, but you've spent an hour trying to avoid doing it. That's where resistance gets us. We spend way more time, effort, energy instead of just simply doing, in this case, the next right thing, or being honest with ourselves, or living in the solution, or all of these things that make up, a new way of living. Most people are resistant to change. That's just a human characteristic. Addicts and alcoholics are driven by fears and an expectation that things will just work out, right? The resistant mind is thinking things will just work out. Resistance goes with denial. We were talking about self-motivation earlier this week. In order to become self-motivated, you have to see a benefit. In denial, in our resistance, we don't see a benefit. We're waiting for things to just work out. And so when we get opportunities to change, we resist change. I'm going to stay the same. I just want everybody else to change, or everything else to change. overcoming resistance is about learning how to do, not feel, right? Resistance to change is all about feelings, emotions. Overcoming resistance is moving into that place where, the old saying, do the next right thing. It doesn't say wait until you feel the next right thing. It's about doing the opposite, even though we don't feel like it. And alcoholics and addicts are very good at pretending to want change. And I think a lot of that, we give a lot of lip service, but then nothing changes. I think that's kind of maybe half and half. I think deep down inside there's something in us that wants change, but then there's the other part that still believes that we don't have to change much. And so we just tend to wait. We go, yeah, I want a different life as long as you'll give it to me, right? As long as my boss would change, my mom would do this, my dad would do this, the traffic would do this, my roommate, my ex, my whatever it is. We still wait for everyone else to change. Learning how to live in the solution in recovery is literally the path of least resistance, right? It's so simple. Once you finally get into a groove and we finally become a little bit more surrendered, and of course it gets better and better as we go, you realize how simple it is, right? The big book refers to that. There are some people who just cannot give themselves over to this simple program. It's a very simple process, and that goes with any kind of change. But we bring so much to the table. We bring our pain and our trauma and our unrealistic expectations and our sense of entitlement and all of our defects, our perfectionism and anxiety and fears, and so it's very easy. In fact, I would say it's become habit to resist change simply for the sake of resisting, right? That's from zero to this point in our life. That's one of those characteristics that we've just developed. We are expecting resistance within ourselves. We don't have a long history of making decisions based on what's in our best interest. We have a long history of making decisions based on what's going to feel the best, right? There's the emotional reward. So when we get into a process of change, and the definition of change is to make or become different, and it's like, well, I do want my life to be different, but I'm waiting for you to do it. And we can stay in resistance for a very, very long time, as you guys know. So it can be even confusing, like on this fourth point. We can be in it and really believe it, and we can learn how to say all the right things and touch on all the right points, and our families get encouraged, like, oh gosh, this is going to be it. He sounds so serious this time. But the reality is that's all it is. We're not really making changes within ourselves. We're still expecting change to occur. And so that's how we stay stuck in this resistance to change. How not to recover, right? Okay, so let's talk about, let's break the word down, resistance. This is 1, 2, and 3 is the actual parts of the definition. Each one of these describes what resistance actually is. And it's very interesting, to me anyway. Resistance is the refusal to accept or comply with something. Okay, so, just think about what's required of us, right? We need to recognize our way of living didn't work, our thinking is messed up, therefore I should be willing to try a new way. Well, resistance is a refusal to accept that idea. So we end up giving a lot of half measures, right? We partialize pretty much everything we do. We want to pick and choose the parts that seem relevant to us, right? What's that sound like? We're still relying on our own thinking. If only man, I kind of like this, and that's an interesting idea, and yeah, I can start making my bed, but we'll discount all the other areas that we don't think are relevant, and that's why we end up, half measuring it. We're refusing to accept or comply with the full solution. Things like rules, lecture topics, suggestions. Now you can overlap that, with any kind of change experience in your life. Remember, most people are resistant to change. Think about it. Okay, you just got a new job and you've got to move, or your school is over and it's time to move out and you got to find a new place or job or whatever. But in those situations, we tend to accept and adjust and ultimately comply. Why don't we resist change in those kind of scenarios? Because it's not a threat, right? It doesn't play on our trauma. It doesn't play on our low self-image, right? When we get into recovery and we discover I've got to change me, well, it's easier to stay stuck in denial. Well, no. There's not a lot wrong with me. I'm pretty good. I'm not like you people. I'm not like that, and I never shot heroin, and it could have been way worse. I'm fine, right? It's a threat to who we think we are, which it's not really, but that's the perspective that we bring to the table, which is why we resist so much. Another way to look at it, kind of jumping over to the solution, is the greater the level of our resistance really indicates a greater need for confrontation, right? Like a face-to-face coming together, this is who I really am, and learning how to accept that. The second definition of resistance is an attempt to prevent something by action. Now this is the kicker here. Remember, we were talking about how it takes energy, it takes effort to resist, right? If whatever the tractor is moving towards me and I don't want to get crushed by it, I have to push back against it. I have to resist it physically, mentally, emotionally. We're doing the exact same thing in the recovery process when we are being resistant. We are pushing back against it. I don't like it. I don't like it how it makes me feel. I shouldn't have to do it. I don't want to experience it. And we stay sick. In fact, we don't just stay sick, we get sicker. We get worse and worse and worse. So this attempt to prevent something by action requires a lot of energy. And in that process, as we're resisting change, these are some characteristics. We end up creating our own chaos to justify why we are resisting. Well, it's not really me, it's my mom, it's not, it was that boss, it was, I only lost that job because they were mean and they never liked me from the beginning, and we're just constantly justifying all of the destruction in our life. I'm not like these people. And I know probably at least one time in almost everybody's experience in early recovery, we've all thought that, right? At some point, may have been day one, may have carried that idea out for a long time. I'm not like these people, and that would be expected, because when we come to the table, that's one of those defense mechanisms that is ingrained in us, right? Anytime we encounter an experience that makes us feel uncomfortable, we're always critiquing it, judging it, pushing back on it. Well, it's the same thing early in any kind of change process. It's like, oh my gosh, that's where that little saying comes from. So when we first crawl into recovery, we're not looking for all the things that apply to us. We're looking for all the things that don't apply to us. And of course, the sickness is it's like whatever you pick out that you think doesn't apply is typically what applies the most. But that just shows how screwed up our thinking is. But we all, I'm just not like these people because I sit in this group and this guy's talking about how he had to file bankruptcy and this guy got a DUI and this guy whatever. And since I've never experienced those things, none of it applies to me. That probably is the single biggest area of our resistance to change. And until we start getting honest and recognizing what does apply, what's the saying in AA? Don't look at the differences, just notice the similarities, something like that. Until we start owning those similarities, we're going to be stuck in this resistance. We complain a lot, and that's because that's old behavior, and so change hasn't occurred yet, so we're still complaining, we just haven't drank today. We're still lying, we're still gossiping, still debating, and we're keeping our focus on everything around us, which we think keeps the focus off of ourselves. Right? I don't want to look at myself, but I want to pick this out, I want to pick that out, I want to pick this out, I want to pick that out, and use all of that to justify, see, I don't really need to change because I'm not as bad as everybody else. The third definition of resistance is the ability to not be affected by something. Blake and I were just talking about this before group. Think about this for a minute. The ability to not be affected by something. That sounds like it could be a good thing. If you're a surgeon, it would probably be a good thing to not be affected every time you see blood, right? Or you're not affected when you have to slice into your patient and open them up. And, it's a good thing to have an ability to not be affected by something. But in resistance, as it pertains to resistance, we use it as a defense mechanism. Right? I'm so afraid to change. We literally keep the world at bay. And we do that with our thinking, the way we think, the way we behave. It would be like, being in a process of change and not changing would be like sitting in, taking a class on plumbing, right, or basket weaving or whatever, for day after day, week after week, month after month, and 12 months later, 24 months later, whatever, you finish and you don't know the first thing about basket weaving. You don't know the first thing about plumbing, and yet you were present throughout an entire process of change. What is happening? Extreme resistance. It takes effort. You have to work at resisting. You have to consciously decide, I am not going to change. I am going to wait for everybody else to change. And we've all lived there. I've lived there, especially in my early recovery experience. Any minute, man, my mom's coming crashing through that door. Just any minute, my mom's going to come save me. And, that didn't happen. So, I had to finish that process. And then, she's going to set me up now. She's going to get me a new car. She's going to get... that didn't happen. And, then I had to... See, with every bit of resistance that we apply, I'm not going to change, I want everybody else to change. But then reality sets in, then we become motivated for change. And that's why, you hear the term rock bottom. Rock bottom is like, okay, the only way I'm going to climb up is if I do something. Well, the way we can still be so resistant to change in the course or in the middle of a process of change is because even though realistically we may be at rock bottom, we don't see it. Because remember, we're not able to accept it. I can't accept it. No. Someone always rescues me. No. Someone else always changes. No. Things just always work out somehow. And so we stay in, what they call magical thinking. And the good news is there is a way to break that. But what tends to happen is just remaining in a process of change. Eventually, unless you're a sociopath, and of course I haven't worked with sociopath in years, but they're out there. But most of us are not sociopaths. Most of us are just entitled, unrealistic, stuck in our addiction, stuck in our wrong thinking, stuck in pain, stuck in resistance. And there is a way to move through that. We just need to keep coming back, as they say, right? All these little corny sayings that that we hear in recovery, every single one of them has so much power behind them. So when you're hearing those things, it works if you work it. Keep coming back, one day at a time. Easy does it. It's funny to go, oh wow, I've seen that on how many AA walls or whatever. They're there for a reason. They're there because they're real. They carry so much weight. We have to pay attention to those things. Okay, the fourth point on here is not it's not part of the definition. However, it was worth mentioning. Ultimately, when we're resisting change, we're really lacking critical thinking. Right? There is no critical thinking. There's no logical thinking. It's like, the example that we use all the time, the guy that totals his truck, he gets drunk, he totals his truck, he ends up in the hospital, and he wakes up the next day and he's like, wow, there is some serious stuff going on in my life. I need to make some changes. That's critical thinking, right? You can bring consequences to bear in your own life, in your own decisions. Wow, I got to do something different. The alcoholic wakes up and goes, oh my gosh, it was that something was wrong with my tires, or I knew I should have taken a different route, or it was just a little rainy that night, or somebody spiked my beer, or there's a complete lack of personal responsibility. So what it is driven by is emotions, immaturity, entitlement, fear. Of course, we break these down individually. We can do entire lectures on each one of these, but just think about it as a whole. If I'm resisting anything that makes so much logical sense, there's got to be something else happening, right? It's not critical thinking. You really need to make some changes, Miles. Every time you get behind the car, behind the wheel, you wreck it, you get a DUI, you quit your job, you whatever. You probably ought to look at that. So to have an opportunity for change, but to resist so much, is not critical thinking. It's driven by our fears. It's driven by that old sense of entitlement. Somehow things will just magically work out because they have in the past. It's driven by our unrealistic expectations. It's driven by feelings in general. And I'll tell you what's at the core of all that is the second point here is immaturity. Now remember, immaturity simply means a life not developed. Right? Well, that's what we've been doing. Maturity is a life fully developed. But, and I would suggest, that's not our goal. Our goal isn't to become fully developed, right? We need a lifetime for that. But we should be willing to be in a process of maturing, right? We should be developing. And so that's why, I'm not the only one that says this. There's research studies that, talk about the link between immaturity and addiction. And I think recovery is just about 60% just growing up, right? Just maturing. And specifically that means being willing to take responsibility for ourselves. Resistance is a complete avoidance of taking responsibility. It's us waiting. It doesn't matter what we say, it doesn't matter what we think or how we can justify it. The bottom line is I'm really just avoiding growing up. So we fight and we put in so much effort and energy to not change, when if we would just surrender, turn ourselves over, submit, accept, comply to a new way of living, life gets so much easier. But if it was that simple, we could like write it on a piece of paper and here, just follow these instructions and you'll be good. It doesn't happen overnight. We don't just break our resistance overnight, because look at all that we bring to the table. And of course there's more than this. We bring all this trauma, this idea that I can't change because I've tried to change and it never works out for me. And so we bring a lot of junk that takes time to work through. But we can begin by being willing to be in a process of change and stop resisting. One of the biggest ways we resist is just debate, right? Things like analyze and intellectualize, and that'll come out here in a minute. So this, we talk about the 12 steps. Step 1 comes first for a reason. Step 1 is a person taking a hard, honest look at themselves and the way their life has been, and being able to conclude that as long as I'm driving, it gets pretty unmanageable. And since I don't want to live an unmanageable life, I'd like to make some changes, right? That would be critical thinking. That would be very logical. When we're resisting, we're not applying critical thinking. So that's where we got to start, catching that. Recognize your own resistance, which is the point of this entire group. You got to start recognizing how you resist. We resist in small ways. It could be, hey, would you take out the trash? Well, why? I thought someone else just took out the trash. Or I would have taken out the trash, but we resist in little ways and we resist in big ways. We're constantly questioning, debating, analyzing, intellectualizing, rationalizing, justifying. Well, what we need to start doing is just practicing following the next suggestion. Whatever it is. Well, I don't know why I'm making my bed, but I'm going to make it anyway. And then all of a sudden your thinking starts catching up. But it's kind of, I already kind of said this, but I want to read it the way I wrote it. Step 1 is like asking yourself, has my way worked? Now, and then some of you guys are like rationalizing right now. Well, there was periods in my life when it worked a little bit, and there was this one time, and the only reason it got out of hand there at the end was because of this other thing, and that's what resistance looks like. Is the sum total of your life acceptable to you? And of course the answer is no, it should be. So making some changes makes a lot of sense. I think I'm going to make some changes. But the kicker is we don't know how. So if I'm going to make these changes, I got to be teachable. I got to be willing to learn how. And not just say, over here, not just over here on lip service, not just say, oh yeah, I really want change. I really want something different. Man, I'd love to have a different way of living. I want to have what that guy has. All the while doing nothing different. That's not change. That's lip service. So here's a process of resistance. This is what it looks like. If you're still unsure, this is I got a process and I got our strategy. Okay, so our process of resistance, remember the definition of process is just a series of actions. Right? That's all process means. A process of change means I'm willing to take on a series of actions to make or become different. Right? What do we always hear, from some sponsor or mentor? Oh, I didn't know what to do in this situation. Just do something different. Well, like what? Anything. Just do something different. If you would have normally raised your voice and slammed the door and rushed out the room, do something different. Why don't you sit down and apologize or whatever? It doesn't matter. Do something different. So that's all process of change is. This is a process of resistance. And we got this one down pat. And it begins with our thinking. It begins with how we view change. And we view change like we view everything else. It's something to do. Like we've just enrolled in another class, and I gotta get in, I gotta look good on paper, I gotta do a little bit of work, and then at the end I'll get the benefit, and then I can move on to the next class or whatever. Then I can get my job. Then I can. That's not change. We can be very adept at as a taskmaster, right? You put some things in front of us. This is why workbook assignments can be so dangerous, because we're really good at compliance. We can look good, like wow, we're being so serious about change, but we're still resisting. We haven't really turned ourselves over to a process of change. We're just faking it, and we may get some things done, but you're not going to get different because we're not changing. So we'll pretend through, that's supposed to say lip. It looks like it's up. Here, so we pretend through lip service without actually making changes. We analyze, intellectualize, and debate about the process of change. What does that look like? Well, kind of like we were talking about earlier. We like to pick and choose. Well, I kind of like that, and I don't understand that. Or we'll sit and lecture and have a particular topic and go, none of that stuff applies to me. Maybe one of those things, and I think this is more applicable. And we're just constantly resisting. It's like taking your car into the mechanic, and he's telling you everything that's wrong with it, and we're like, I just don't think so. It's not making that one sound. It's making the other sound. He's got the computers and the machines, and he knows exactly what's wrong with the car. And we're arguing with the guy. We're debating. I'm not really sure about that, and I don't know about that. We do the exact same thing with every one of our life experiences. We come to the table with this viewpoint that it's just something to do. And people who look at change or recovery as it's just something to do, you'll get out of it what you put into it, which will be very little. It will be half measures. We'll question everything. We do just enough to get by, and that I like to call that the just enough to get by myth. We think we're doing just enough to get by, and the way we measure that is as long as nobody else is like coming down hard on us, critiquing us, judging us, calling us out, we think we're getting away with something. But it's like, oh, I didn't pay my electric bill this month. I tricked them. I told the lady on the phone that I was going to pay it, but then I didn't pay it. We didn't get away with it. Nothing happened today. Nothing happened next week. But eventually, the electricity goes out. We don't recognize that the things that we do, the decisions that we make, are costing us. We're the ones with low self-esteem. We're the ones with high anxiety. We're the ones with frustration. We're the ones with unmanageable lives. We're the ones with all this dysfunction. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But we live in this process of resistance, not even recognizing how it's hurting us, because we view as something to do. Strategy for resistance. These are the strategies that we use. Getting complacent tends to happen first, right? We just kind of back off. It's phase one. We start going, or phase two. Getting complacent kind of is at the end of phase one, right? And I kind of related that to those two phases. But then we start seeking out others who will agree with us. Now here's an interesting thing. Here's an example of resistance. Why do we always compare ourselves to, say, a lesser situation? Right? We never, like when times when we're being held accountable for something, or we're being encouraged to improve our performance, we never say, oh, well, yeah, so-and-so, he's been working really hard, and he reads those books, and he takes notes, and I want to strive to be like that. We always pick out someone in our surrounding that isn't doing anything for their own life, and then we'll say, oh, but so-and-so didn't do their chore, or so-and-so, he never takes notes, right? We never compare ourselves with a role model. We always compare ourselves with how we see ourselves. Think about that for a minute. That's resistance. That is, I don't want to change. And I just need excuses to make it feel okay for me not to change. That's immaturity. This is my favorite one. I think this is the most common one. We treat the change process as a battle against the world. Why? We see ourselves like we're in a battle. And so that's why one of the reasons why we debate so much. In our mind, we don't necessarily, you might, but we don't necessarily express all of this debating that's going on in our head, but we're thinking it, right? We're not spinning around in our head positive things and, next right thing and personal responsibility and make your words have meaning. Those aren't thoughts we have. The thoughts we have are, oh man, I gotta get by. I gotta do just enough. I can't stand so-and-so. I hate this other idea. This is stupid. So-and-so better or else. Right? We literally see ourselves like we're in a battle against the world. It's us against the world. Which is why we're always looking for people who will agree with us. I call them allies. I've heard many people, like in AA, when recommending like a sponsor, our tendency is, and this is part of resistance, our tendency is we want to pick out someone that would be a good friend, right? I think I like that guy. He's so funny. He makes me laugh. I think I could have fun with that guy. Wrong pick. We need to pick out people who will tell us the truth. We need to pick out people who won't listen to our lip service. We need to pick out people who will hold us accountable. Think about that. If you're surrounding yourself with people who agree with you, you're not going to grow. We can't grow. Right? Because people who agree with me will look how we think. So if I find other people that will agree with my thinking, I'm not going to get very far. That's part of growing up. We've got to be willing to put ourselves in positions with people who will tell us truth. Just tell me the truth. And it may hurt, I may not want to hear it, but I'm willing to accept and change. Accept and change. Incidentally, that's the ultimate tool that we require, is confrontation. The definition, let me think, the definition of confront, can you pull that up real fast? I think it's something along the lines of like, to come face to face.
Face up to and deal with a problem or difficult situation.
Okay, that's good. I like that. To face up to and deal with a difficult situation. So I know it can be kind of scary, that word confrontation. I think about like, being in junior high and having to deal with my band teacher and with his paddle with the holes drilled in it. You ever have one of those guys? You're 30 seconds late to his class and you're going to get a whooping. It wasn't good. But that's all confrontation means. we're not really going to do it all the way to ourselves, right? That's, of course, the big book talks about getting honest with ourselves. But we've got a long history of kind of minimizing some things and discounting some things and just avoiding some things. So what we really need, if we want to overcome resistance, is to be willing to come face to face, and that information needs to come from somebody else. That's the significance of accountability. That it's okay, especially if you've got a lot of trauma in that area. Maybe you grew up and you got yelled at a lot, or you got chewed out, or whatever, and it caused you some of that emotional pain. It can be a scary time, and so that's one of those things we talk about, resistance being driven by fear. That can be a huge one. Coming face to face with who and what we really are can cause you to feel like you're getting in trouble. Like, oh my God, I've done something wrong. Oh my God, there's something wrong with me. And so what happens, it's natural instinct. We're going to push back. But we have to overcome those things. We have to be willing to just accept reality. The greater the level of resistance can only be overcome by a greater understanding of reality. Right? As long as I go, oh, everything was fine, and I just went through a little bit of period, and it's no big deal, and yeah, there was that child support thing, but that's just because my ex was just being mean, and then there's this other thing, but that's just because of that. We're not going to make it. We've got to be willing to get completely reality-based about who we are and what we are. And I'm not talking about, shame. We think we've done that, but we don't do that. We go all the way to shame. We go, I know I've already done that, and it just makes me feel like a loser, so I don't ever want to do it. Well, you didn't do it right. That's not reality. You're not looking at yourself in reality terms. Okay, so this last one here, I want to talk about this other solution. I guess I just did, but think about that. In fact, why don't you guys share on that? We got a couple minutes. Why don't you guys share on that? What did it take for you, for example, to finally come to the realization, I need to make change? What was that experience? What was that thinking?
I don't know, maybe that along the lines of that if I kept going down the road that I was going to kill myself. Not like, I was going to drink myself to death.
Yeah.
I think that was easily where I was going. And I didn't want, no matter how much I think I wanted to, sometimes I don't really want to die. In reality, I don't.
Yeah.
I like being sober and kind of like living life. I do, but
Yeah.
so, and the way I was drinking was not good. I would have definitely, and it not drank myself to death. I would have ended up in prison or all of the things that they say. One of them would have happened. It just depended on when it would have happened and which one. So.
And you probably heard that for years and years and years, like from family members and just close friends and things like that. If you don't, you're gonna end up killing yourself. You're not gonna amount to much. But it didn't have an impact, or just the alcoholism was so great that it just didn't matter.
Yeah, I think it was both of those. I think that I narrowly avoided any real consequences for a while, and then I got that DWI, and not long after I was with that girl, and that lady from the treatment center came over to check on us, and I blew like a .45, and like she was like wildly, she was like, that's not good, and I was like.
Right.
Like, whatever.
Right.
I feel great.
Right.
But like I could have easily you know, and then like she took us to the hospital. And I just bailed out. I just refused service and left. So went back
Wow.
to drinking. Like, so it's like, how many times was I easily like right there? I could have easily just that last drink would have done it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, I think these
Wow.
last few times, like, and that's what it takes, I guess. You know, just to really gotta get that far into it to really realize. Some people not, I guess, but for me, I mean, I had to really have some shit happen for me to be, and it's still hard. I still, you know, am resistant every once in a while, but I think being here with lots of time to think about stuff and like be realistic about the past, like, I don't want to do that anymore, so it's not fun.
Each one of those bad experiences is a form of confrontation too.
Yeah.
If you're open to it, you know, wow, this, I thought I could do better, but here I go again. And then whatever, a month later, oh gosh, I thought I could do better, but here I go again. It keeps getting worse. You're getting reality based with yourself. You just don't know how to change.
Yeah. For sure.
You know, the good thing is there's no specific level, or there's no picture that we have to fit into. It's like, well, until this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, I don't need to change. That's a good way to die. We all have enough circumstances now that if we would take an honest look, should be enough motivator to change, to want to change. And for you, it's one thing, you know, for this person, me, anybody else. But resistance is, I want to compare myself to your situation. You know, well, I never got a DUI. I never got rushed to the hospital. I never blew a 4.4, what was it, 0.45?
0.46, 0.45, something like that.
Good Lord. That's like major alcohol poisoning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to me, that might seem like a very dramatic experience. Oh gosh, see, I never did that. But what did I do? What is reality? And be honest about whatever that story looks like. You know, which is worse? You getting a DWI and almost getting rushed to the hospital for alcohol poisoning, or not paying your child support for 5 years? You know, which is worse? But I can use your situation and go, oh, see, that bad stuff never happened to me. But what does my life look like? So my point is at any moment we can choose to seek change, but you have to recognize how we resist it in the first place. And we love other people's stories. It's like the more dramatic, the better. Oh gosh, that person overdosed in a bathtub from heroin. Oh, awesome! I didn't ever do that. So see, I don't have to change. That's
like reinforces it in your head.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Hearing those horror stories.
Yeah. In fact, I think you were telling me this, that in one of the early printings of the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, the stories that they used were from some of their more dramatic cases, and few people could relate. And so they quickly reprinted another series of it and put more average stories in there. But because that's just our nature. It's like, oh, I'm not like that. See, so that doesn't really apply. I don't need to read this book or whatever. Getting reality based, it's like it's this right here. Do you like the way your life has worked out? Take alcohol and drugs out of it. Do you like the ups and downs? Do you like the short-term success followed by failure, followed by more short-term success followed by failure? Do you like the roller coaster? Do you like the reliance on others? Do you like the, it's like we were reading, we are so desperate to have freedom. And yet we make decisions on a daily basis that put us in positions to give up our freedoms. We want freedom, but we haven't developed the personal responsibility to have and maintain freedom. So if you're okay with that, then we're right. We don't need to change anything. But if we're not okay with that, we can make some changes and get something different. It's that simple. But as long as we're doing all these things and we're comparing and resisting and minimizing and discounting and rationalizing, we just stay stuck. But we don't really stay stuck because, as you guys know, this is stuck, and then we, phase 1, phase 2, and then we just keep cycling until eventually we don't get a DUI. We get in a hit and run or a head-on collision, and then it's over. It's done. Or we die in our sleep from alcohol poisoning or whatever. There's so many other ways to die. I always tell the story. I'll just kind of finish it with this. You guys have heard the story of, Joe, a old guy of ours, and Joe always thought he could drink beer. No matter what, he could always drink beer. It's funny because you and I were just talking about this too, on this other little topic. And I asked him one day, I said, Joe, you're always saying, I think I'll always be able to drink beer. And I said, therein lies the problem. Because what I don't ever hear you say is I'm going to always call my kids. His kids were several states away. And he had a rough relationship with them. But in this process, he was re-entering their life, and it was really cool. I even got to meet the kids. And so you don't ever say, man, I'm always going to call my kids. You're always saying, I'm going to always drink beer. That it's not about the beer. It's about your priorities. What's going on with you? Anyway, Joe finishes, and he was doing good, but he got cancer. And he's always maintained that thinking that things will just work out. Everything we're talking about, the things will just work out. And he was going through cancer treatment, and he was getting better. And he goes back for this appointment, and they say, wow, things look really great. Your treatment's been wonderful. We want to see you in a month. And what he heard was, I'm cured. I don't need to do anything else, right? Because he looked at treatment as something to do, his cancer treatment. It's just something to do. I just got the approval of others. All is good. That's on here somewhere. Yeah, I just got the approval of others. I'm out. And he was dead about 6 weeks later. It came back. Of course, if he had gone back to that follow-up appointment, they would have caught it in time, but he didn't. It's our thinking that's killing us. We have to change our thinking. And the way like we talked about last week, the way our thinking changes, because you can't change your thinking, but you can change your acting. So if we'll change our behavior, what we do next, then, and solidify that, our thinking will follow. But as long as we think, I don't really need to change, I just need everybody else to change, or everything will just magically work out somehow, we don't get change, right? Because that's not different. That's the same way we've been thinking since probably as far back as you can remember, right? So the first thing that we have to be willing to change is the way we think. And we do that by changing the one thing we can control is our behavior. Do the next right thing, and the thinking will follow. You can put all three together. Do the next right thing, regardless of feelings, and the thinking will follow. I like that. So there you go. You just handled your thinking, your feelings, and your response. Okay, you guys want to share anything else? I appreciate you coming. We're going to embark on a adventurous journey in the wilderness, and our engineer is going to celebrate number 40. That's exciting. Well, let's close it out and we'll get on with our weekend. We will be back next Thursday.